India Today's biannual survey brought to you by Karvy Insights. And remember, this is a big survey because it's the first one since COVID, the economic slowdown, and the Chinese conflict.
This is the 19th time the India Today group has conducted a Mood of the Nation opinion poll. And over 10 years, every 6 months, we show you which way the political winds in the country are blowing. Before we take our first data set on this broadcast, I want to take you through the methodology that's been engaged by Karvy, our pollster. So across 19 states of the country, 12,021 interviews. These were done telephonically. Because of the coronavirus, pollsters haven't been able to go door to door as they usually do. These are telephonic catty interviews conducted between the 15th to the 27th of July, Rajdeep.
That's right, and we have special guests who will take us through all the big findings. I'm joined by Rajdeep, the editorial director of India Today magazine. He joins us. With him is Debashish Chatterjee of Karvy, who will have to really respond to all the questions around the poll findings. We also have General VP Manik, and we'll tell you in a moment why we have him on the show right at the top. Appreciate your joining us, sir. We also have GVL Narasimha Rao of the BJP and Supriya Srinath of the Congress Party. And the reason we are starting off with General Malik as part of our panel is because the first big question is China and the government's handling of the China issue. I'm just going to give you some points. The government's handling of the China issue, remember, is huge because in the context of all that has been happening in the last few months. Did the government give a befitting reply? 69% are saying yes. So to that extent, a thumbs up for the Modi government on China. Failed to respond well is 15%. No information, 9%. All figures, remember, are in percentages here. Who is to blame for the India-China dispute? China's aggression, 47%. Faulty foreign policy, 30%. Intel failure, 11%.
Now, the interesting insight there, Rajdeep, seems to be just the high level of faith voters have in the Prime Minister. Because on China, there is a real serious problem even at this moment in different sectors of the line of actual control. And while the opposition's been hitting out hard, some military analysts have been asking questions. And let's just start our discussion by asking General Ved Malik first, because forget what Rahul Gandhi and the opposition are saying. In our first response, when 69% of the respondents say the government has given a befitting response on the China issue, how does that square and contrast with the reality of the situation, General Malik, on the ground?
On this issue, I think we need to note 2 points. The first one, of course, is why were we surprised and why there was no surveillance or intelligence information. That, I think, is a matter of concern. Apparently, we have to do a lot more about this. The second issue that I have is on the outreach, the information. I'm afraid, despite all the good experiences that we had, including that of Kargil war, this time, lack of information in our own public, amongst our people, that has created a lot of rumor mongering, all sorts of finger pointing at the government.
So, the interesting thing, of course, is, as Rahul said, the strategic community appears badly divided, but the people once again are reposing faith, it appears, in Prime Minister Modi, even on handling of China. Rajdeep, is that something that should give the government some comfort? Because at the moment, the government is facing a lot of flack. The latest being that they allegedly have taken down a defense ministry report, or they have taken down a defense ministry report that used the words transgressions by the Chinese.
Rajdeep, I'm glad that General Malik is there. And I looked upon this as Modi's Kargil. And the response is given, and General Malik asked the right questions in terms of intelligence and why we didn't know about it, as well as what you asked in terms of the fact that Mr. Modi had made a statement saying there's been no transgressions, and yet you have a defense ministry statement coming out contradicting it. But what they have done well, I would say, is that they've done perception management really well, both domestically as well as internationally. Now, if you take domestically, they turned the battle towards a betrayal not as blaming India as the problem, but actually Chinese aggression and Chinese betrayal. And then by banning Chinese goods, made it a patriotic sort of a thing where they whipped up public sentiment to be anti-China, and the entire mood changed in the sense boycott China goods, also companies and everything else. And Mr. Modi going up to Ladakh and addressing the troops there had a significant sort of bolstering effect on the public to give them the kind of opinion that
he tapped into a sense of nationalism. I'll come back to that because we've got lots of pointers. We'll come back to more of that. We've got a lot of space to go through.
Just one more point
yes.
I wanted to add to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just one more point. When I said internationally too, he's managed it well. The government has managed it well in the sense India's problem has become the world problem. Both the US is supporting us, all the European nations, as well as Japan and, Australia, all sort of pointing fingers at China as an aggressive nation. And we've been able to link it up as a pattern of Chinese aggression across the South China Sea and others. So both in terms of perception domestically and internationally, you see that the Modi government has been able to turn public opinion against China, not towards itself, not to blame itself, and also got international support for what they're doing.
Okay, so the next question that we asked was, should Chinese goods be boycotted? An overwhelming 9 out of 10 respondents said, yes, Chinese goods should be boycotted. Only 7% of the respondents in this India Today-Karvy poll said that Chinese goods should not be boycotted. The next question is about Chinese apps and whether Chinese apps should be boycotted. There again, 91% of the respondents felt that Chinese goods should indeed be boycotted, and it's correct to ban the Chinese apps. 91% saying yes, only 7% saying no. I want to put that question to GVL Narasimha Rao because the reality of the situation at this time, GVL, is that there is a Chinese incursion in multiple sectors. Talks between India and China have reached a deadlock. The Chinese aren't pulling back. They're currently sitting physically on territory that was once patrolled by the Indian army, even if it is disputed in nature. This could have been a monumental public relations perception disaster for this government. Instead, somehow, 69% of the respondents think India has given a befitting answer. Apart from economic coercion, militarily we haven't done very much, and yet you seem to be winning the day. When it comes to headline management, perception management, this government is just stops.
No, Rahul, that's a complete misreading of the situation.
Okay.
Your statement is completely non-factual. People of this country have seen how under Manmohan Singh, the UPA acquiesced 620 square kilometers of land and did not have the courage even to speak up against China. People have seen how 42,000 square kilometers of Indian land was taken away by China either directly or through Pakistan, annexed through Pakistan, and these governments did not have the courage to speak up against China. And today, at a time when the whole nation and the world is rallying behind China, behind India, you have the Congress, the main opposition party, which has surrendered to China in the past, which has signed deals with China, clandestine deals. Even Supreme Court made an observation about the 2008 Congress and CPC deal and received funds in the RGF. I think it all shows Congress party and some political parties in India are actually doing a PR for China.
So you're saying it's not
actually.
So it's not your perception. It's not so much your perception management. You're contrasting your government with the previous Congress government.
The whole entire issue.
The fact is only yesterday you have pulled down from the Defense Ministry a report which says there are Chinese transgressions. Now this has led the opposition to say that the Prime Minister has been economical with the truth. The point is this, let's be clear, you failed in terms of intelligence on China. You may have even failed in terms of diplomacy in handling the Chinese. You were doing Malapuram, you were doing summits in Ahmedabad, they didn't result. So I'm asking you, is it perception management or is it contrasting yourself with what previous governments did?
I think, you see, Rajdeep, PR and television management is not what will help. People know what is the core competence and what are the core values of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, what is the core value of the BJP, they can easily see a Congress party which has compromised national interests and national security for the sake of simply playing
but political petty
politics with BJP.
But Rajdeep, there is a big difference.
Can I repeat?
You are in power. The Congress is not in power.
Can I just complete, Rajdeep? Please complete me.
Yes.
Not an inch of Indian land has been surrendered. That's a matter of fact. And a party which has surrendered tens of thousands of square kilometers and is still today compromising with China is making allegations against us. It is only making us look even better in the public.
No, but here is the difference, Rajdeep. You know,
Yes.
GVL is saying no land has been surrendered. If they're sitting on our land or land which we patrol, then at this moment the status is complicated, right? That's part one. That's a factual situation. But when Modi goes to Ladakh and projects the kind of muscular nationalism that he does, dares the dragon across the Himalayas, it's so much different from A.K. Antony saying, we don't have the money for the armed forces, we can't do anything, we can't buy the Rafale.
So it is optics at one level. It's very, very good optics. The question is, what is the substance? It's optics.
No, but
at the end of the
substance
day.
also is they're going out of their way to purchase equipment and trying to make, but why should we be in a position where we have to make emergency purchases?
I'm just wondering whether Supriya Shrinate, part of the problem is that the Congress on national security issue, this is national security, which the BJP has always carried believes its USP is the way it sort of deals with national security and the issue of nationalism. Has the Congress gone overboard in attacking the BJP day after day to the point where people say, look, at the moment, the country must stay united on issues like China. This is not an issue on which we want Congress versus BJP.
So thank you very much for having me on the show. And first of all, I don't think there is ever a doubt that the country is not united against China. I think we are united against China more than ever before. So let there be no doubt on that. I think before every question we ask, we raise this point. Whatever decision the government takes to handle China, we stand solidly behind it. But the reality is that the two questions that you put forward to the BJP spokesperson, his response was all about the Congress. Now, well, the audience may believe something, but the reality is that the situation on the ground is very, very different. And I have been following reports put forward by your foot soldiers, put forward by your reporters on the ground, and they tell a very, very different story. Status quo has
The
changed.
difference is when people look at Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who was hardly able to utter a word against China, when they look at A.K. Antony, who when he was asked about the Rafale deal, said we don't have the money this year, we will not be able to buy the Rafale. At least the BJP government, the Prime Minister himself, when he talks to the people, when he talks to the soldiers, going to Ladakh at a time of high conflict between India and China, that sends a certain message. And whether you like it or not, people are buying his answers much more than they are buying Rahul Gandhi's attacks.
But Rahul, that is exactly what I'm saying. That brute nationalism and this perception management is not going to deny the reality on the ground, is not going to deny the fact that the Prime Minister was very, very economical with the truth, and is not going to deny the fact that the Defence Ministry, the Defence Ministry had to take down its report.
The fundamental premise
had to take down its report, which talked about transgression. Why did that happen?
Just so that
because
it's clear.
this was in direct contrast to what the Prime Minister had said.
No, just so that it's clear to everyone, this is a Mood of the Nation poll. So it is about perception, it is about managing that perception, the ecosystem, and what people feel, because ultimately what they feel is what drives how they vote.
Does that change reality on the ground?
No, but there, Rajdeep, the challenge is then for the Congress. If the reality on the ground is different and people are still believing something different, then the opposition hasn't been able to do a good enough job.
I think, Rahul, it comes back to trust factor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just about 12 to 18 months ago, the Prime Minister scored a big victory in an election. So that came through an element of trust. I don't think trust evaporates overnight. If the situation in China gets worse, if the conflict takes another form in which perhaps India finds itself on the back foot, then things could change. At the moment, I think the sense is let's give the benefit of the doubt to the Prime Minister.
No, but Rajnath Singh hasn't been in denial, for example.
No, they have been in denial.
No, Rajnath Singh hasn't. He said on multiple times, he said that we are in conversation, we are trying for disengagement, we don't know how long it will take or whether we'll succeed and to what extent. I can't guarantee that. So there have been some utterances which accept that yes, there is a problem on the ground.
the point is, I think this is one of the issues also where the media has raised questions. I mean, the reports coming of the way the Defense Ministry put the word transgression, took it down from websites is all raised in the media because the media is often accused of being part of this perception management. But look at the numbers. Pay extra for made in India goods is a question we ask. Yes, say 67%. No, say 30%. When you look at all these numbers, Rahul, they clearly show that economic nationalism does work. At the end of the day, if you speak this language of let's boycott Chinese goods, let's buy Indian goods, that seems to be at the moment the kind of questions where people will back you, completely. India's military capabilities versus China.
This is a very interesting question because, and as General Ved Malik and any scholar of military affairs will tell you, there is massive asymmetry when it comes to military capabilities between the Indian and the Chinese armies. We are capable of a good defense. Are we capable of knocking the Chinese out? That's debatable. But when this question was put to the Indian people in this Karvy poll, 72% of the respondents said India can defeat China. 9% said India cannot defeat China. 10% said it will end in a stalemate. General Ved Malik, what do you make of the fact that 7 out of 10 it's the faith they have in the Indian army, the men on the ground, the young soldier, the young officer, and the leadership, political and military, where people feel that 72% of the respondents thought that India can beat China, General Malik?
No, there is no doubt that people in India have a lot of faith in their armed forces, and that is how it should be. I mentioned 2 negative points earlier, minus points, but the fact is that once we got to know about this inclusion, the response both militarily as well as politically was very good and very correct. The fact is that we were able to pump in our forces quite quickly, and we were able to induct even a whole division in that area to strengthen our positions all along the eastern Ladakh. And the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister, they both did rather well in going to the forward troops and raising their morale and, sending the warning to China.
Therefore, in a way,
that was a good work done. And one second, that was a very good work done. And people have a lot of faith in the armed forces. But to say that we can defeat China, I think that probably is an exaggeration, because we can defend ourselves, but to defeat China is something quite different to that.
I come back to the issue of, therefore, issues which involve this element of what nationalism, hyper-nationalism, call it what you will. Raj Chengappa, the sense one gets is on this issue, Prime Minister Modi is on familiar territory. These are the kind of issues which he is able to convince, it appears, a large number of Indians that, look, I have your best interest still in mind. So unless you suffer a military debacle or a defeat, it will not be seen as necessarily in the red column.
Rajdeep, let's not forget that Mr. Modi's track record in terms of hitting back has been good. We've seen it after the Uri attack, and we've seen it after Pulwama, the Balakot attack happened. So he does have a track record in terms of hitting back at adversaries that turn hostile.
Right.
The other point that comes through is the way he's handled the crisis. You see, there's military means, which he has then, as General Malik rightly put, gave a good response over there. But he's also used 2 tools. One is using business to put pressure. You win a war not just through using your weapons, but you also win a war by psychologically impacting them and also economically impacting them. So
but how much of a difference is it making?
A clear signal that
a lot of this seems to be managing the environment psychological more than real. He's not damaging the Chinese economy.
No, it is then, as I mentioned earlier, it has turned, Rajdeep, it has turned viral in some senses. You see, TikTok is now to be banned by the US as well. Everybody else is looking at China with a different eye in terms of doing business with it. So you've put some business pressure on it. At the same time, I think, internationally also, China is getting diverted.
Right.
America sent its warships across that side. So you are putting international pressure. But I think the main thing that one can see in terms of the handling is, look, we are not wanting to go to war with China.
No, but that's the question that we asked.
Yes,
go ahead, Rajdeep.
Go ahead.
And this is one of the very startling responses, and I want everyone to look very carefully at the next question coming on your screen. The question was, should India go to war with China? 59% of the respondents are saying yes, 34% are saying no. Now, ordinarily, no one should seek war, and war is bloody, it's brutal, it's expensive. But General Ved Malik, 6 out of 10 respondents saying, Dekhi jaogi, let there be war. It shows that the Indian people are raring to have a go at the Chinese army. That if you mess with us, the people are strongly behind the Indian government, strongly behind the Indian army, and they want to have war a go if it comes to that.
Basically, that is because people don't understand what a war is, and they don't understand where the conflict at the moment is taking place. None of them, hardly any one of them have been to this area of Ladakh. They don't know what kind of deployments are there. So there is a lot of ignorance when they make a statement of this nature. And but the fact is that in this area, with the kind of intrusion that has taken place, these are small intrusions. Indeed, there are intrusions. But to go to war is a very major step that would be taken. And
right,
that
but that's
affect
again,
the whole nation.
Again, General Saab, this is a mood of the nation, so we're only looking at mood. The other question we asked, can India trust China? Yes said 9%, and 84% said no. So clearly there's a lot of mistrust of China, there's anger against China, and it appears the Prime Minister has cleverly been able to tap into all of that. I come back to it, Supriya Srinath. Is this the issue which you should be going at in the government, in the manner that, let's say, Rahul Gandhi has gone at the government on China, knowing that it is a sensitive issue? Could you possibly have raised it? But as some opposition leaders other opposition leaders have pointed out, this is not the issue on which we want to confront the government.
No, I think trust with China is very important, and especially because Mr. Modi has mishandled the situation. He's constantly spoken about his bond and his chemistry with Xi Jinping. We've seen what happened at Sabarmati and at Mahabalipuram. This despite Doklam, and this despite now Leh and Ladakh and, you know, the transgressions that are happening. So I think our reading of China was completely wrong. And if you ask me, the foreign policy is to be blamed here, which has become extremely Mr. Modi-centric. It is all about photo ops. It is not about the career diplomacy that people have put into relationship with China or any other
Respond to that,
country.
GVL.
And let us
GVL, respond to that. At some level, the foreign policy of Mr. Modi will come under questioning for the personalization. He may well claim that, you know, he may well be getting public support on China at the moment, but diplomats and strategic analysts will tell you that there are elements of his foreign policy that are now coming under serious question.
This is a very dubious explanation or a dubious kind of reasoning. The people of India don't buy this at all. And the leaders of the world don't believe this at all. What they see, the way they look at it is different. They see Prime Minister Modi ji made an effort to have best of relations with each of the neighbors in the region. And he went out of the way to have best of relations with Pakistan earlier. And when Pakistan did not respond, and they responded with stealth, he taught them a lesson. He also wanted to have best of relations with China. And when China betrays, he's giving them a dose of the same kind of, he's giving them a bitter dose.
Broadly,
So people look at Prime Minister as somebody who has made a good effort, but when they do not reciprocate, he teaches them a lesson for their lives.
You know, how
and today
voters seem to
China
be
is
perceiving it in this poll, Rajdeep, is very clear. The Prime Minister sent this message that, did you want me to be friends with China or not? Did you want friendship with the Chinese people? Yes. We gave that a shot. It's the Chinese who betrayed it. So instead of this being looked at as a tactical, strategic, military intelligence failure or a failure response and imagination, it's now Xi Jinping, the Chinese people, the CCP, the Chinese government betraying the Indian people and the Indian government.
Also, Rahul, it shows the wide distinction and gap that exists between us sitting in studios talking to strategic affairs experts and diplomats who will perhaps look at diplomacy, foreign policy more carefully versus someone out on the ground. The person on the ground at the end of the day say, "नहीं, Modi ji में विश्वास है, ये चीनी जो है, ये ऐसे ही गद्दार है, ये बदमाशी कर." So you see, I think we need to recognize that, and I think maybe that's where I can bring in Debashish Chatterjee of Karvy. This is corrected for our viewers, a perceptional survey. Am I correct? It's not necessarily, you know, an endorsement of the Prime Minister's strategy as much as a perception that the Prime Minister is doing it right. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. This is completely a perceptional survey, and our questions have been very, very perceptional. Like, can India trust China without naming any particular personality over here? So it's more of a country believing the other country, and the options were there.
So, I think it comes back to perception management. The Prime Minister is astute at perception management. The trip to Ladakh that you mentioned was part of that perception management. He didn't send Rajnath Singh there. He went there himself. There was talk that the defense minister would go. It's the Prime Minister who went.
No, but he's also been very calibrated. General
And he's not named China, interestingly, even once.
Instead of what we saw after the terror attacks in Pathankot and Uri, where the Prime Minister was, waxing eloquent, there was poetry flowing, ki sar nahi jhukne dunga, etc. He said the right things, but he hasn't been as all-out aggressive as he was against Pakistan. So there is a calibration in response to the reality that this is an emerging superpower, and therefore we have to be careful about what we say and yet hold firm on the ground. I'm not pulling back. I'm not going to accept defeat. I won't be cowed down, but it's not as if I will go and start creating a fight or picking a fight which I know is tough to win.
Rahul, don't forget what he said after he came to know about those 20 soldiers who died in Galwan River Valley. And he said that we will not let their lives go forgotten. And that is the kind of a message that he has said. And I totally agree with you that since 2013 or 14, the whole, our strategy has definitely become more proactive than it used to be earlier. And we have taken some steps. And I won't be surprised if some step is taken in future also. Of course, such steps are taken only at the right time and at the right place.
But here's the point I want to make, General Malik, and I want to draw you in and Rajdeep on this. Unlike you'd expect from a populist who's very impulsive, Prime Minister Modi, despite his nationalistic urges, has kept his cool. He's come under attack. It's not something he's happy about with what the Chinese have done.
He hasn't mentioned China by name. I think that, he's not said, hum Chiniyon ko sabak sikhayenge. No, if you, in Ladakh, he's been very careful.
Rajdeep, when he goes to, when he goes to Ladakh and he's talking about what's happening on the other side, he's talking about Vistarwad, he's not talking about Japan or Pakistan.
Yeah, but it's not in the sense of a Trump who will say things.
No, but Trump runs the United States. Look at their economic and military capabilities.
He will not say things that will eventually end up embarrassing his foreign office beyond a point where the space for negotiation completely disappears. At the end of the day, you know that you've got to work with the Chinese through negotiation. You've got to work through military de-escalation and diplomatic negotiation. It's a long and tortuous process. You take two steps forward and one step back, but you've got to work. So to that extent, I think he's conscious of the fact that I can't just go, saber rattling into a sensitive issue, and perhaps, there is an element of wisdom in that kind of approach. I don't think that's
the point I'm making, and that's the magic of Modi, that he's actually been very cautious in what he said and what he's done, and yet he's pressed the right buttons.
Also, an element of embarrassment, Rahul.
No, but he's been able to convince the people. But Rajdeep, militarily, we haven't evicted the Chinese. The Chinese are still sitting where they are. And yet he's been able to convey strength. It's the best of both worlds.
That's because he remains a formidable communicator. I think he's been able to communicate that, look, I'm going to get tough with China when I need to. Give me time.
And it's faith. The people of India believe that Modi ji's got our back covered.
I think they do. At least that's what our survey certainly seems to suggest. And perhaps that's a good point on which to
take a quick break.
Because we've got not just China, but we've got other issues. And these are issues where perhaps the Prime Minister may have even more questions to answer. In particular, what's coming up next? The economy.